Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading to Taiwan. We're going to look at its largest triad, the Bamboo Union. You
Hmm.
sent over some really fascinating material, and already I can see this group kind of breaks the mold of your, typical organized crime story.
Absolutely.
Our goal today is to really get under the skin of this organization, where they came from, what they do, and, well, those really unusual aspects that make them stand out.
Exactly. I think what makes the Bamboo Union so compelling isn't just the criminal stuff, but the layers underneath.
Mm-hmm.
The surprising history and how they operate.
Yeah.
We're talking origins tied to major social upheaval, deep and sometimes pretty unsettling connections to political power and, well, a global footprint.
Mm-hmm.
It really adds up to a picture that challenges how we usually think about these groups.
It really does. The word triad might bring certain images to mind, but what you shared shows something much more, well, nuanced. We've got historical accounts of their beginnings, news reports on their ongoing influence, even insights into how they're structured. And then there's that funeral for their former leader. Quite the spectacle.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Starting right at the beginning. Your material says the Bamboo Union formed in 1957. The founder was a figure called Kin Duck, Chen Qili.
That's right.
But the reason they formed initially, that's particularly striking, isn't it?
It really is. The early years, um, they're rooted in a very specific social dynamic in Taiwan back then. They weren't just, guys looking for trouble or illicit games.
Right.
The first members were mainly Weishengrun children. So the kids of people who came over from mainland China after the Civil War,
Yep.
and they faced a lot of discrimination, hostility even, from the majority Hoklo kids. So the Bamboo Union basically started as self-protection.
Huh. Self-protection.
They set themselves up on Bamboo Forest Road,
Yeah.
that's in what's now New Taipei City, and they literally had to fight for recognition just to carve out a space.
So almost like a gang born out of social necessity, a specific cultural context.
Pretty much, yeah. But they didn't stay just a sheep-fighting group for long.
No, I see that here. Your material points to a pretty big shift towards more, let's say, traditional criminal stuff by the late 1960s. What drove that change?
Well, that initial need for protection, it kind of naturally evolved into looking for profit. You see them moving into the classic areas,
Right.
protection money, extorting local businesses, factories.
Standard stuff for organized crime, I suppose.
Right. But a major boost to their finances came from the Vietnam War.
How so?
All the American GIs on leave in Taipei, it created this huge boom in the nightlife scene. Gambling, prostitution, drugs. The Bamboo Union moved in hard, used their muscle to control it, push out rivals.
Oh, okay.
That period really marks their shift, their evolution into something more like a transnational criminal syndicate.
Right.
And you see that ambition clearly when Cheng Anlo, the White Wolf, moves to Las Vegas in '68.
Hmm.
Yeah, to oversee expansion.
Yeah.
Especially in like California Chinatowns, Las Vegas gambling halls. They were thinking bigger.
Las Vegas in the late 60s must have been a land of opportunity for, well, certain kinds of enterprise.
You could say that?
But what's really, quite unsettling are the deep connections your sources show between the Bamboo Union and the Kuomintang, the KMT,
Hmm.
the ruling party, the Chiang family. This seems like it goes way beyond just turning a blind eye.
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial point. They weren't operating in a vacuum. They were deeply tangled up with the political scene.
Yeah.
Your material clearly states they play a big role in the KMT's White Terror.
The period of political repression.
Exactly, to solidify KMT power. And it's not just speculation. Declassified government documents, these came out in 2020, they show that Bamboo Union members were knowingly employed by Taiwanese government agencies.
And knowingly employed.
By who?
Like the National Security Bureau, the Intelligence Bureau. And this was happening before the mid-1980s.
So what you're seeing isn't just crime. It's this blurring of lines between, state power and organized crime. It's a pretty unsettling look into Taiwan's political history back then.
So they weren't just tolerated, they were actually used. Almost like an arm of the state in some ways.
The lines were definitely porous. I mean, the documents you provided suggest gangsters were serving as close aides to Chiang Xiaoyang.
Chiang Kai-shek's grandson.
That's one. And what's even more, well, astonishing, is the revelation that Bamboo Union members were actually admitted into military, police, and intelligence academies by the KMT.
You're kidding.
No, which meant individuals with clear criminal ties could potentially reach really high positions within the government itself.
That's That's incredible. It really makes you think about the nature of power and control back then.
It certainly does,
Uh,
and the potential long-term impact of those connections.
yeah. Speaking of reach, their influence wasn't just limited to Taiwan, was it? Your material talks about them expanding overseas and how that really boosted their profile.
That's right. In the early 80s, they started working with this group called the Iron Blood Patriots
Hmm?
for operations abroad.
Iron Blood Patriots.
Yeah, and that partnership was really significant because it gave the Bamboo Union access to a much bigger slice of the global heroin trade,
Ah, the drug trade.
which obviously increased their power, but it also brought a lot more international attention, especially from the U.S.
Right, that makes sense.
But that alliance, the one with the Iron Blood Patriots, it fell apart pretty dramatically after the 1984 murder of the journalist Henry Liu.
Henry Liu. Okay, that name seems central. That assassination really brought them global notoriety, didn't it? It feels like a major turning point in how the world saw them.
Absolutely. Before that, maybe they were seen as a powerful regional gang, sure. But assassinating a journalist on U.S. soil, that catapulted them onto the global stage, and not in the good way.
And the sources confirm it was them.
Yes, sources confirm Bamboo Union members, including the founder Chen Shili himself, carried it out.
The founder himself, King Duck.
Yep. They were caught, convicted. Though it's worth noting, most were paroled by 1991.
Paroled relatively quickly, it sounds like.
It does. But the fact the founder was directly involved just shows their audacity, their reach at that time.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of how actions by these groups can have massive global fallout.
It really is. And looking at the timeline of key incidents here,
Yeah.
it's quite sobering. Before the Liu assassination back in 1980, the daughters and mother of an opposition leader, Lin Yixiang, were brutally killed.
Mm-hmm.
And in 81, a professor, Chen Wenchen, was also killed. Now, the direct link to the Bamboo Union might be less explicit in the sources for those, but it paints a picture of a really violent, politically charged environment.
Definitely sets the scene.
Then we see later incidents mentioned, like a 2009 murder in a Las Vegas karaoke bar.
Right, by Xiaoye. He got a life sentence in the U.S. for that one.
And a reported link to the 2015 kidnapping of a Hong Kong businessman, Wang Yiquan.
Yeah.
It seems like their activities, unfortunately, just kept going, crossing borders.
These later incidents really underline that ongoing transnational aspect. The Vegas murder shows they still had presence, capacity for violence overseas, and the alleged link to the Hong Kong kidnapping, well, it just shows their potential reach, their involvement in high-profile stuff way beyond Taiwan.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to the leadership.
Yep.
Your material has this really informative table outlining the historical figures, the bosses. We see names like Chao Ning, Yang Qingping, the famous Chen Shili, King Duck, Chang'an Lo, White Wolf, and the current leader, Liu Chennan, the bump forehead.
The bump forehead, yeah.
What can we kind of glean from this leadership history?
Well, what's striking is how long some of them were in charge. Chen Shili, for example, was a dominant figure for a huge period.
Yeah.
And the nicknames themselves, King Duck, White Wolf, they add to that almost mythical status these guys sometimes get. The table also shows periods of, like, acting leadership, which suggests, internal power struggles, maneuvering within the group. It reminds you that even in these big crime structures, they're individuals, shifts in power happening all the time.
Right, it's not monolithic. And the funeral of Chen Shili, King Duck, back in 2007, that seems like a really significant event. It highlighted their influence, their complex place in Taiwanese society. The scale of it sounds almost unbelievable.
It truly is remarkable when you think about it. Over 10,000 mourners turning up.
10,000.
Yeah. Including politicians, members of Taiwan's other big triads, Four Cs, Celestial Way plus Japanese Yakuza, reps from crime families in Hong Kong, Macau, Malaysia, Thailand.
Wow. That speaks volumes, doesn't it? About the respect or maybe the fear he commanded.
Absolutely. And it underscores those extensive international connections within the criminal underworld.
And the police presence. Over 1,000 officers just monitoring the event.
Yeah, that really highlights how aware the authorities were of the potential implications. Such a huge gathering of that nature. It's like this public display of power, but under intense scrutiny.
A strange dynamic.
And the money spent. Chartering a plane for the body and attendees, the elaborate ceremony. It shows the sheer wealth and reach of the organization. And those quotes from fellow gangsters, suggesting Chen saw himself as a patriot, an idealist, not just a common criminal. That's really thought-provoking.
Yeah, how so?
Well, it forces you to question how these groups kind of legitimize themselves, how they build their own identities, moving beyond just the simple label of criminal.
It really does blur those lines, doesn't it? Okay, let's talk about how they're actually organized today and what they're up to. Your material suggests it's maybe less rigid, less hierarchical than some other big crime syndicates we know.
That's a key difference, yeah. Unlike, say, the Yakuza or the traditional Mafia, the Bamboo Union reportedly operates with a less formal structure.
How does that work?
The idea is around like 24 big brothers degi who lead different groups. It suggests a more decentralized model.
Okay.
Think less like rigid military ranks and more like heads of different, somewhat autonomous factions within the big organization.
Mm.
Each might focus on different territories or different types of crime.
Right.
Membership includes both the muscle, the enforcers, but also individuals who are more like businessmen operating within the group's orbit.
Interesting.
And the key thing seems to be mutual benefits, obligations. That's what holds it together. You see Cheng Anlo being recognized as an opinion leader by other triads back in '95. Even legitimate businessmen supposedly sought his help to settle disputes. That shows that informal yet very real influence.
So less about strict ranks, more a network of influence and relationships. And your sources mention a code of ethics, 10 rules. That sounds almost paradoxical.
Well, it might seem contradictory, but actually many criminal organizations have some kind of internal code. Yeah. Often about loyalty, respect, certain rules of behavior within the group. It helps maintain order, prevent internal wars.
I suppose that makes sense.
And there's an interesting contrast mentioned. The mainland branch is apparently more disciplined, more organized, clearer ranks, promotions, benefits.
Why the difference, do you think?
Maybe the different operating environments.
Yeah.
Maybe a greater need for strict hierarchy to survive or operate effectively in mainland China.
Okay. And their activities now. It seems like a pretty wide range of illicit stuff. Your material points to partnerships, like with the Japanese Yakuza and the Sam Gore Syndicate, including Seichi Lab.
Yeah, those international partnerships are crucial for large-scale operations. Working with established groups like the Yakuza or a massive drug trafficking outfit like Sam Gore lets the Bamboo Union tap into existing networks.
For what, exactly?
Production, distribution, laundering the money, all on a global scale. But beyond the big international drug trafficking, your sources also list more local stuff. Security services, the illicit kind. Obviously, debt collection, loan sharking. They have a diversified portfolio, you could say.
Like a franchise business model almost, but...
Instead of fast food, they're coordinating drug shipments, yeah. Relying on local managers, other criminal groups to handle things on the ground in different places.
Okay. So to sort of bring our deep dive on the Bamboo Union to a close here, what we're looking at is this really unique criminal organization.
Definitely unique.
Origins deeply tied to the socio-political mess of post-war Taiwan. They went from a self-protection street gang to this transnational syndicate with, well, deep and sometimes pretty disturbing links to the ruling political party back then. Their history is marked by ruthless crime, but also this surprising level of political entanglement, culminating in things like the Henry Liu assassination and that almost theatrical funeral for Chen Shili.
Absolutely. And their structure, seemingly less rigid than some others, combined with those international partnerships, lets them operate both inside Taiwan and globally across a whole range of illicit activities.
Which kind of leads us to our final thought for everyone listening. Given this history, the scale of their operations, what does the continued existence and influence of the Bamboo Union suggest about the really intricate, often hidden connections between crime, politics, and identity? Not just in Taiwan, but maybe in other societies too.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder about the unseen forces at play, shaping things behind the scenes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.